First, we will act on the City Club report on Measure 88, driver cards. Andy Shaw, chair of the committee, will present the report and then move for adoption of the report's recommendation. The meeting will then be open for debate and vote by City Club members. Now I will turn the podium over to Andy Shaw.
So hi, I'm Andy Shaw. I chaired the driver card committee. First, want to thank the other 7 members of our committee who gave their time and thoughtful participation. In recent years, a number of states have begun adopting or establishing driver cards for residents who can't prove legal presence in the United States. This policy shift occurred as a result of sort of post-9/11 policy at the federal level, the REAL ID Act, which required states to identify folks that had legal presence in the U.S. so they could give identification for getting on a plane or entering a federal building. Most states have complied with the REAL ID Act, but shortly after realized that residents of the state were beginning to lose their licenses because they were unable to renew their license. They couldn't prove legal presence in the state. The data we could find shows that more than 100,000 Oregon residents would lose access to driver's privileges without this driver card policy being adopted. So to address this, last year, Governor Kitzhaber pulled together a work group to propose legislation to address the issue. The group was broadly representative, included legislators from both parties, as well as law enforcement, labor unions, immigrant rights groups, and business interests. What they developed is a proposal to establish a driver card for anyone who's a resident. They have to pass all the other tests that you have to pass to get a license, but they just aren't proving that they're here legally in the United States. They have to show that they're a resident of the state for more than a year. They have to pass every other test, driver's test, the knowledge test, and have their photo ID taken, and they have to renew their driver card every 4 years rather than 8 years for a normal license, and they have to pay a fee every 4 years, unlike the rest of us paying a fee every 8 years. The legislature put a bill together. It was bipartisan sponsorship of the bill, passed both houses of the legislature. At that point, though, opponents of the measure, who were largely representative of groups concerned about illegal immigration, gathered the requisite signatures to put it on the ballot and asked the voters to weigh in. That became Measure 88, which is before all of us in November. Fortunately for your research committee, most of the issues at play had already been vetted pretty well in the legislative process. Lots of testimony, letters, fact sheets, research was put together. But we still, of course, conducted interviews with supporters and opponents, a very robust group of, unlike some of the previous committees, we had the opponents come in and testify, both legislators who are chief petitioners as well as Oregonians for immigration reform. Supporters, of course, want to vote yes on this, affirm the state law. Opponents want to vote no, reject the state law. Listening to both sides, though, we boiled the measure down to just a few issues. Enforcement of immigration law. We found that federal immigration policy does not envision states being a regulator of immigration policy or immigration enforcement, and actually state policy prohibits law enforcement from spending public funds to enforce immigration policy. So the committee didn't feel that really the issue at hand was immigration, but rather whether people know the rules of the road, and et cetera. On law enforcement, the next major category, the most compelling arguments we heard there came from chief police, the chiefs of police, in particular our chief of police here. They argued that when they pull someone over, they really want to know who they're dealing with, and an ID card from the state tells them that and allows them to look into their record immediately and know what situation they've entered into. Road safety was the next major area. This was actually a hard area to pin down. There's not a lot of data about the impact of driver cards in other states in terms of road safety. On insurance, there were studies. They were mixed at best, though, as to whether people who get driver's cards obtain insurance at a higher rate than anybody else. The two arguments that really sold us under safety are a driver cannot get insurance without some form of license or driver card, and that drivers with an ID are less likely to flee the scene of an accident. So we thought that was a compelling reason to think that road safety would improve with the advent of driver cards. The fourth major category, jobs in the economy. Supporters and opponents had completely divergent views on this. Supporters argued that not issuing driver cards would cause some workers to leave the state and that we would have a labor shortage. Opponents argued that undocumented workers are taking jobs from other unemployed Oregonians, and that if they weren't here, that would give an opportunity to other Oregonians to work. The best case study we found was Alabama, which a few years back, passed some pretty restrictive immigration laws, and it led to a pretty significant loss of jobs, a $2 billion impact in the state. So we didn't really, we bought the argument that the supporters brought forward, although honestly, we were seeing it was the economy that drove people to decide whether they were going to come to this country or not. Lastly, impact on our communities. It was really the question of how we want our communities to feel and function. The opponents argue that driver cards will serve as a magnet for undocumenteds to come to the state. The fact that Oregon has, most of the states around Oregon have this policy already in place, we thought really reduced the magnetism that Oregon would enjoy if we created this policy. Finally, the police chiefs noted they really want to create a sense in communities that they're there to serve people and protect them and be there for public safety, not to check immigration status. And that, with the events of today, or this last week, that seemed particularly compelling to me today. So I would move on that basis that you accept the unanimous recommendation from the committee to vote in favor of this measure.
So two things, just to pause here for a moment. Whoever had the foresight to open the windows in here, thank you very much. Very, very hot up here under these lights, and I'm sure for all of you, and I don't have any beer. And our parliamentarian has saved us. I now believe that you all understand our process and could read along with me, so I will no longer subject you to the process. If at any time you've forgotten the process, I'm happy to read it. So we have only one commenter on this driver card petition, and that is at the yes microphone, Sharon Robbins.
Hi, I'm Sharon Robbins, a City Club member, and I just wanted to thank everybody for the opportunity to have served on the committee with Andy. It was a wonderful experience. I saw there were a lot of hands that didn't raise here in the room about having served on a committee. If you haven't, try it. It's a fabulous experience. I wanted to just reiterate what Andy said. The hardest thing for our committee in looking at this issue was to step back from the genuine concerns that everybody shares about federal immigration policy, about how it's applied, about how it's enforced, and to step down to the issue of what's on the ballot, which is whether the state has a responsibility to make the safest roads possible for its citizens. And that's what we tried to do as a committee. So please read the report. We tried our very best to pull everything down to that focus. And I also wanted to remind folks that it's incredibly confusing. If you're voting yes on this, you are supporting the Senate Bill 833, which issues driver's cards to those that have undocumented residents. So that's confusing for folks, but remember, voting yes means that you support driver cards. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We will now vote on the motion to adopt the report, which recommends a yes vote on Measure 88. Please mark your ballots at this time. Thank you to Andy and to the committee for their hard work.